In 2010, Nokia controlled over 40% of the global phone market. Just 3 years later, it was almost dead. And the company that was supposed to save Nokia actually ended up destroying itself too. This is the shocking story of Nokia and Microsoft. For a long time, Nokia was the most powerful phone company on earth. Seriously. Almost everyone owned a Nokia. You remember them, right? They were reliable, practically unbreakable, and absolutely everywhere. They were the undisputed kings. But then, the world started to change. The first iPhone arrived, and Apple completely changed the game. Then, Google's Android operating system started spreading like wildfire. Suddenly, Nokia's kingdom was under attack. The company panicked. It needed to make a move, a big one. And it made the biggest, most fateful decision of its entire life. It chose a partner to fight back against Apple and Google, a partner that would seal its doom. So what was this huge mistake? Well, instead of doubling down and improving its own operating system, Symbian, which was already famous and had a huge user base, Nokia decided to partner with Microsoft, and this wasn't just a small collaboration. Nokia completely abandoned Symbian. They threw away years of development, a massive community of users, and a whole ecosystem of apps. They bet everything they had on a brand new, unproven platform, Windows Phone. On paper, the idea sounded perfect. You had Nokia, the master of hardware, teaming up with Microsoft, the giant of software. What could possibly go wrong? It was supposed to be a match made in heaven, a third superpower to challenge the duopoly of Apple's iOS and Google's Android. They announced the partnership with huge fanfare, promising a new era of mobile innovation. The first Nokia Lumia phones running Windows Phone were beautiful. The hardware was classic Nokia, colorful, well-built, with amazing cameras. The software was different too, with its live tiles and sleek, minimalist design. It was a bold attempt to offer something new, but in reality, it was a total disaster. The biggest problem was the app gap. Developers, who are the lifeblood of any smartphone platform, largely ignored Windows Phone. They were all busy building for the iPhone and Android, which already had hundreds of millions of users. Why would they spend time and money developing for a new platform with a tiny market share? This created a vicious cycle. Without popular apps like Instagram, Snapchat, or even Google's own YouTube app, users had no reason to switch to a Windows Phone, and without users, developers had no reason to build apps. Nokia and Microsoft tried to pay developers to create apps, but it wasn't enough. The ecosystem just never took off. Users who bought the first Lumia phones found themselves in a ghost town. They missed their favorite apps and services, and soon, they started leaving. Nokia's market share, which was already falling, went into a freefall. The dream of a third ecosystem was turning into a nightmare. Now you might think this was just Nokia's problem, but Microsoft had its own hidden issues that made everything worse. Microsoft saw the smartphone revolution happening and desperately wanted a piece of the pie. They thought that by buying Nokia's phone business, they could finally compete head-to-head with Apple and Google. They believed that by controlling both the hardware and the software, just like Apple does, they could create a seamless, powerful experience that would win over customers. So in 2013, Microsoft made a massive move. They bought Nokia's entire phone division for a staggering $7.2 billion. It was one of the biggest tech acquisitions in history. The CEO of Nokia at the time, Stephen Elop, was a former Microsoft executive, which made the deal seem almost destined to happen. Microsoft was now officially a phone manufacturer. They had the factories, the patents, the design talent, and the brand recognition of Nokia. They thought they had finally cracked the code. But Microsoft fundamentally misunderstood the smartphone market. They were a software company used to dominating the PC world, where their strategy was to put Windows on every computer. They tried to apply the same logic to phones, but the mobile world was a completely different beast. It wasn't just about the operating system. It was about the speed of innovation, the user experience, and most importantly, the ecosystem. Microsoft's leadership was slow and bureaucratic. Updates to Windows Phone were infrequent and often lacked the features users wanted. Their strategy was confusing. At one point, they were promoting Windows Phone, but at the same time, they were releasing their own Microsoft apps on iPhone and Android, which basically told customers they didn't need a Windows Phone to get the Microsoft experience. They failed to build a compelling ecosystem of connected devices and services like Apple and Google had. Within just 2 years of the acquisition, the reality hit them hard. The Nokia phone business they had bought was bleeding money. In a shocking move, Microsoft announced that it was writing off almost the entire $7.2 billion investment. It was a public admission of a colossal failure. This is where everything completely collapsed. The acquisition that was meant to save both companies ended up destroying them. The Nokia brand, once a symbol of innovation and quality, began to disappear from the market. The phones were now being branded as Microsoft Lumia, but it didn't matter. The sales were terrible. Microsoft started laying off thousands of employees, many of whom were former Nokia workers. The dream was officially over. Windows Phone was put on life support, and eventually, quietly, Microsoft announced that it would no longer develop new features or hardware for it. The platform was dead. All the developers who had invested time and resources into it were left with nothing. All the loyal users who had stuck with the platform were abandoned. Microsoft completely exited the consumer phone market, admitting defeat in a war they had spent billions to fight. And what about Nokia? The part of Nokia that wasn't sold to Microsoft continued to exist, focusing on telecommunications equipment and networking. But the Nokia that everyone knew and loved, the company that made the phones that connected the world, was gone. Its identity was shattered. It was a tragic end for a company that had once been on top of the world. Two giants had entered into a partnership, hoping to conquer the world together. Instead, they both walked out broken and defeated. So, what's the real lesson here? This story isn't just about bad technology. Symbian wasn't perfect, and Windows Phone actually had some really cool ideas. This is a story about a series of catastrophically bad decisions. It's about a failure of leadership and vision. Nokia wasn't really killed by Apple or the iPhone. Microsoft wasn't truly killed by Google or Android. In the end, they destroyed themselves. Nokia lost its confidence and abandoned its own strengths. Microsoft was arrogant, thinking it could buy its way into a market it didn't understand. They both failed to adapt to a rapidly changing world. They underestimated their competition, and more importantly, they overestimated themselves. This is why studying tech history is so fascinating and so brutal. It's a graveyard of giants who made one wrong turn. It's a powerful reminder that in the world of technology, no one is too big to fail. If you enjoy real tech stories like this one, packed with lessons and drama, make sure to subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.